one of my last big flares, I sat there and I was like, I can't freaking live like this. Like, this sucks, right? Like, I am seeing a gastroenterologist. I am, doing the things that I should be doing. I'm a good patient. I'm taking my drugs. I'm going to see doctors, like, and I'm still not better.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by Sam Jactel, founder and CEO of Ayble Health. In this episode, we discuss the company's digital platform for GI care. Sam shares how frustration with his own health issues led to founding Ayble. Plus, we talk about AI-powered nutrition plans, decoding the mind-gut axis, and the future of patient-driven healthcare. Let's get into it. The Fitt Insider Podcast is brought to you by Jack Taylor, our exclusive PR partner. More than just PR, they're creative storytellers and brand builders who actually understand the health and wellness industry. To learn more, head to fit.co/JackTaylor. That's FITT.co/JackTaylor. Hi, Sam. Welcome to Fitt Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate the opportunity. Excited about our conversation.
Yeah, likewise. I have, we chatted a little bit offline. I've followed Ayble Health and what you guys are working on. I think it's super interesting and much needed, both in kind of as it relates to GI health, but also overall health and nutrition and a lot of things that go along with that. But yeah, just to kind of set the stage, could you introduce yourself, tell us about Ayble Health, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, appreciate it. My background is I started my career in clinical research, spent some time in the business world afterwards on the consulting side as a VC for a little bit and then an operator. I am a GI patient, which I think is like the main thing that's probably relevant for this conversation. So I've lived with inflammatory bowel disease for about 10 years, and we've got kind of a long family history of this. I've got two younger sisters, both of them have GI issues. My mom, my grandmother have had GI issues, and I think the reason why I talk about poop all day is because that's just what happens at home. I felt when, we started the company, we had a particular opinion as patients and a particular like superpower, which was a vantage point that I think is unique to look at everything from the ground level, right? What it's actually like to go get care for GI, what it's like to live with these, what the impact is on productivity, on all those kinds of things. And that I think has guided a lot about how we built the business and what problems in particular we're trying to solve. So that's a little bit about me, and yeah, excited to dive into what we're building.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that come to mind, even hearing you talk about it. Like, people hear IBS, they hear Crohn's, and there's, I'm sure, like a spectrum in terms of how people are being affected, and many people who go undiagnosed, and it kind of gets lumped into, now it's like very kind of trendy in the wellness world of like gut health. And like, gut health is probably not GI, and it's probably not IBS, and it's like all these different things that get lumped together. How do you even think about like tackling and differentiating from the sense of like not only how people deal with all these different kind of symptoms and issues, but just like even talking about it from like an Ayble perspective of like, this is what we do and this is how we go about solving the problem?
Yeah, so there's there's a lot to unpack there, but I think it's a great question. I think terminology is like really important in this space. And so I actually see there are three terms that get used, and I think that are on a spectrum of more and more clinical. So I would say gut health is on the kind of less clinical side of things. And, we know that the gut is the seat of a lot of just general health and wellness. Like, there's a lot of really great research that's coming out around the microbiome and how our gut impacts brain function and, energy and weight loss and all that kind of stuff, as well as digestion, right? And like gastroenterology. But to me, gut health is maybe broader and somewhat less clinical because maybe it gets diluted over a larger, amount of people. And then the next step in is what we would like, I typically like to talk about it like digestive health, right? So specifically around, and we're going to get gross here because we talk about poop. Like, it's about bowel movements, it's about pain, it's about bloating, it's about like just feeling good from a digestion standpoint, right? And then there's the next level, which is gastroenterology, which is like the clinical care of for those specific conditions. And so that's kind of how we think about it. Maybe it's not a spectrum, maybe it's actually like nested right? Like, gastroenterology, and then gets inside of digestive health and is inside of gut health, right? But I do think that the differentiation between those is really important, and our opinion on it is digestive health. So we don't make claims on our impact on other things other than how we're managing your symptoms from a GI standpoint.
Yeah, I think that's super helpful, and that's kind of the reason why I wanted to start there is because they get conflated or confused, and when you do get on the kind of broader gut health spectrum of it, it does then start to border with like kind of snake oil and like what are we even talking about? Oh, by the way, there, like to your point, there is like a lot of really good research around it, and it is important. And it does play into this, but this is a clinical focus, a much more specific thing, and that gets into like your background and how we arrived here. So you're a patient. You say, okay, I'm not getting the kind of care that I need. Nobody seemingly is solving this problem to any extent that's acceptable. Like you're having to live with it, and so many other people are having that same experience. Going from that place to like, okay, I'm the guy to solve it, and here's how we're going to go about solving it. Like, what is that leap, and how does that happen?
Yeah, it's kind of like the accidental founder thing, which I think is actually I've found in meeting other founders that I really respect and stories that you read. I think those are some of the most powerful ones. It's not like someone that has looked at a problem and goes like, I can make money here, right? Having those people who can really experience it and go like, this needs to be solved. So how I started Ayble was, I've struggled to manage my condition over 10 years. And I think most GI patients with IBS, with Crohn's, with ulcerative colitis, with other conditions, I think that's standard, and it sucks, right? We don't believe that it should be standard, and so that's why we're trying to solve it. But for me, it was on one of my last big flares. So flare is just an exacerbation of symptoms. I sat there and I was like, I can't freaking live like this. Like this sucks, right? Like I am seeing a gastroenterologist. I am, doing the things that I should be doing. I'm a good patient. I'm taking my drugs. I'm going to see doctors. Like, and I'm still not better. And I think there's kind of two issues that I ran into. One was like an access issue, and the other one was a tools issue. And so from an access standpoint, I noticed was it's just really hard to get access to a clinician. And I use the word clinician on purpose because it's not just a gastroenterologist that's really valuable to treat a patient. We need a team. And so that means, a gastroenterologist who's got access to a lot of the testing and the drugs potentially, and the surgical interventions for some people are really valuable. But then you have to think about a whole human. And so there's the diet, there's the psychology, there's all the other stuff, social determinants of health, that we know when you surround someone with that, they get better. And I just never got access to any of it, right? And again, like I recognize I'm a privileged white dude, right? And so if I couldn't get access to it, who else was getting it? And so that was one piece. And then the other element was, maybe it's unfair for me to say that I never got access to it. The best I've ever gotten in terms of dietary and psych therapy support was like a piece of paper and a pamphlet of like, here's a PDF of things that if you want to go do it yourself, like go for it. And so to me, that was like the other problem, which is like, even if I did get access, I still wasn't getting better. And so it's a tool that needed to be developed. And so I actually built the earliest version of Ayble by myself on Excel. So I didn't really know how to code. So I built it on Excel, and really my goal was, how can I create what's called an elimination diet? So it's essentially a science experiment you run on yourself, and you go, okay, well, I think that these foods are causing symptoms for me. I'm not going to eat them for a while. And if my symptoms go down, then I go, great, that like there's something in there that is causing or exacerbating symptoms. And then I reintroduce them little at a time, holding all variables controlled, right? Like literally an experiment. And when those foods come back and you feel bad, you know that that's the culprit. Now that takes a long time. It's hard to know where to start and all that kind of stuff. And so that was our core product at Ayble. That's where we started. So it's an AI and machine learning guided precision elimination diet for patients. And we were able to demonstrate that it had huge impact on people, right? Shortened the time to get to, oh, I know what my diet needs to be for a therapeutic impact. And it made it more specific. So like a one size fits none in this space. And then more recently, we've launched our Mind Gut program, which addresses the other piece to it, which is for a lot of GI conditions, they're called like diseases of the brain gut interaction. And the mind and the gut kind of communicate in two directions. So stress, anxiety, all that. If you've ever given a big presentation or you're on a podcast with a very important person and you've got butterflies, you've experienced the top down, right? And unfortunately for a lot of patients and myself included, like having these GI issues and their meaningful impact on quality of life means that about 50% of us have anxiety, depression, PTSD, and even suicidal ideation for some of the extreme cases because of the condition. And then it's a vicious cycle. So I'm stressed, I have symptoms, I have symptoms, I'm stressed, and it sucks, right? You get into this like pit of, vicious cycle. And our new mind gut program helps retrain how your mind and your gut communicate. And so it's all of the gut versions of cognitive behavioral therapy and all of those tools, breathing, mindfulness. And so as a platform, we are now everything that's evidence based outside of the clinic so that wherever you're going, whomever you're seeing from a clinical standpoint, we got you and you can get better.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I appreciate you walking us through that. As you're talking about it, there's this initial like an elimination diet in general. Anybody who's done that for, there's versions of that for just like nutrition, dieting, just trying to dial in like kind of performance oriented things. Then there's the version of that for like allergies. Then what you're talking about, GI, it's like it's almost unbearable. It's you can't even it's so painstakingly like meticulous, and then like you have to then step back by yourself and try to like run this analysis of like was it X or Y or like it clearly like doesn't make sense and is hard to do. So even that initial step of you starting out there and just being like I'm going to run this experiment on myself is really interesting, and it does get to that like founders like accidental founder thing and backing into it and then taking that next step. When you talk about, and I'm not familiar with this, I don't fortunately suffer from GI issues, is that kind of initial step like pills, surgery, like does it go automatically to that, or is this initial step where they do give you a pamphlet and like, hey, figure it out, good luck? How big is that gap between like those two things, which seem very extreme?
Yeah, so I can explain from the perspective of the patient and also what the clinical guidelines look like. I'm not a doctor, so just take that with a grain of salt. But I know enough to be dangerous. Clinical guidelines, according to the American Gastroenterological Association, for the vast majority of patients, diet and psych are either first line, so like the first option that you start with, or part of care that's recommended. And so it's kind of, it's not a silver bullet, but it is, and we have shown that has been effective across a very large range of conditions and acuity of those conditions. And so we do ourselves a disservice when people don't have access to it, and the process of doing it really freaking sucks, right? When we talk to patients around this idea of like doing it yourself, from an academic literature standpoint, you hear people go, "Ooh, it's a a lot of cognitive load." It's like basically just like a lot on you to do it. Really, at the end of the day, when you talk to patients, it boils down to too many bad days. So between where I feel today and where there is this like therapeutic potential, if I go and do these things, there are too many bad days. And so what we've developed to do is to not have that many bad days between where you are today and where you should be, and then make sure that you don't have bad days long term. That's really important too. So sustainable changes over time.
And then I guess the kind of next obvious question is when you think about like business model and the approach, obviously direct to consumer, selling into clinicians, what does that look like from referrals and like building that into the business model to think about? Because and when I became familiar with Ayble and other approaches kind of in this space, my mind automatically goes to like, well, everybody could use this to some extent because surely none of us or most of us are not eating the things that are right for our body. When you talk about the gut brain axis or gut health more broadly, like all these things, and put that in like the general kind of well-being category. But even now, as you get dialed into GI and in the clinic, like who are we selling to? How are we reaching these different populations? And surely, like, where do they overlap?
From a business model perspective, like our goal has always been to democratize access to good science, good new science, right? We have 14 peer-reviewed published studies on our platform, and they demonstrate without a shadow of a doubt that we help, right? And that's, I think, really important to start with. I want to create a world down the road where whomever you are, whatever socioeconomic background you are, you have access to Ayble in a way that's affordable to you. And so everything that we're doing is all about taking steps to broader access and more taking the financial burden off of me as a patient and putting it on the ecosystem that is incentivized to get me better and keep me better long term, right? So for us, the majority of our focus has been on the enterprise sales cycle, right? The B2B2C side of things. So, we have phenomenal employer partners, health plan partners that are looking at their population from a pop health standpoint and saying like this is a top spend category. Ayble is able to deliver outcomes on both clinical side and on cost, and that allows us to be now covered for a larger and larger percentage of the population. But we've also allowed for clinicians to use us. And it solves a different need on the clinician side. I talked about access from the perspective of the patient. From the perspective of the physician, they're just overwhelmed, right? And it is a challenging balancing act that they have to run of like, I have way more patients than I can ever see in a day or a year. Without cloning myself, how do I do one-to-many care? And so our platform is purpose built to independent, just like using us, regardless of what you're doing, get you better. But it can also be used by the clinician. And so we also have health system partnerships where they're using us as standard of care for GI patients. And so I think that's really important. So that's kind of, we're trying to think of this as a community rather than like, oh, I'm going to build this that's competitive with that, but I think I have a big business model on that. You know what I mean?
Hey everyone, we'll get back to the show in just a second. But first, I wanted to tell you about our exclusive PR partner, Jack Taylor. Honestly, this one's a no brainer. We've known the Jack Taylor team for years. They work with some of the most innovative health and wellness companies. We're talking Whoop, Athletic Greens, Hyperice, and many more. Jack Taylor has an extensive industry network, knows how to work with high growth companies, and really invests in building long term relationships. I know this firsthand because they're Fit Insider's PR agency, so I can confidently recommend them, and I do all the time. From startups to more established brands, they go beyond pushing product to help companies truly thrive. To learn more, head to fit.co/Jack Taylor. That's FITT.co/Jack Taylor. Now back to the show. Yeah, it's super challenging, and I always enjoy asking and hearing from founders who are building in the broader digital health space where they have to interact with health plans and insurers and like the traditional system, because at the very foundation, like your company started because like there was some type of shortcoming in like the traditional like healthcare hospital, provider kind of institutional approach. But also you're having to interact with it and you're having to figure out like, where do we sit within this such that like we can get paid from who has the money, like while also at the end of the day like serving patients, right? Because that's what you want to do when it comes right down to it. So it's like it feels like there's this tug of war between operating within the system and operating like kind of around the system. And some people go as far to say like, we're building an entirely different new system from the ground up, and this is going to take many, many years and hundreds of millions of dollars. And awesome, I hope that works out. But then there's like where you sit, which is like, I have to figure out how to live within this and make sure, yes, like we're sustainable and can survive as a business and that we're able to help people. Maybe what are your thoughts on that much more succinctly than me, who I just look at it from the outside and like try to dance around it.
It's a super great point. Like, I think you actually need both, right? Especially when you're trying to solve such a big problem, right? I think you need there is value in just saying like, screw all this, I'm gonna do my own thing and look how cool it is, right? And I'm gonna swing the pendulum pretty extremely on one end. There's value in doing that. I think that it shows what can be done. It inspires people. It challenges preconceived notions, and it challenges the, well, this is always how it's been done, right? And I mean, it's amazing when those things work, right? And I think that you've seen a lot of, a few pretty strong examples. I think the challenge that we have with something like that in healthcare is this mantra of like moving fast and breaking things in healthcare. I just don't think should apply, or at least not in the way that we think about it for like tech generally, because we're dealing with patients, we're dealing with quality of life, we're dealing with like real people, and moving fast and breaking things without being systematic and thoughtful about how you do it, I think just probably does ourselves a disservice. Working within an infrastructure and an ecosystem is challenging for different reasons. Everybody has different opinions and everybody has different needs. And so the challenge that becomes is like, are you a jack of all trades and a master of none? Or have you been able to create a product which intrinsically has value for more than one person? And maybe that value is slightly different for each of them. If you are able to create a product that stays true to itself but has applicability, I think that's where you can really transform. And that's how we've been thinking about building Ayble.
Yeah, and that's kind of apparent to me from the outside, even looking in. Like you are finding that balance, I think, in a very interesting and sustainable way that enables you to now say, from your spreadsheet to a standard of care to introducing the mind kind of program, uh, expanding thoughtfully where you see you're able to add that value in that layer that ultimately at the end of the day like impacts patients in the positive way, which is the goal from the beginning.
Yeah. And I think like one of the ways that we've thought about it too is, who are we and who are we very clearly not? So I think there's an element of this which is like, you think of it from a business school perspective, right? You got your MBA hat on. It's like, well, what are my core competencies and what do I build? What do I buy? Like, separate from all of that, it's if we want to create a world that looks like X, we don't have to do all of it. And actually, oftentimes, if you're able to engage people around you in a community, you get there a lot faster and you're able to get to what you're trying to accomplish a lot faster. And so, a lot of what we do is it's not just us, it's building partnerships, right? So, seeing ourselves as partners to others that have real, meaningful value in their own, right? And where we can come together with the sum of the parts are more than, you know, the whole, right? So like I think that's really important, and seeing it in that lens of rather than we have to do it all. And I think that that's been how we've thought about it. So we, some fantastic partnerships. We will announce this very shortly, but we're working with the Mayo Clinic's complex care program, which is I think a perfect example of this. So the Mayo Clinic complex care program is a program that they offer to employers and plans, particularly tailored to the extremely medically complex patients, right? So when you look at a big population, there's going to be a small proportion of that have multiple comorbidities or very complex versions of diseases, and for which standard management tools aren't always cutting it, or for which like you may in your own community not have access to specialists. And so in this particular case, we understand that for the very complex gastroenterology patients, that is something that those people we can help, but not alone. And so we have partnered and collaborated with the Mayo Clinic's complex care program to send those individuals to Mayo, get world class complex care in a short amount of time, really deep, changing diagnoses, changing treatment plans, doing all that kind of stuff. And as they leave, they get Ayble. So now they have a full support ecosystem, and we have done the thing where together we are more than what each of us could do for that population. And I think that's a really good example of what we're doing, and incredibly proud of the work that Mayo does and what we're doing with them.
Yeah, very smart, very cool partnership. Obviously, one that can be hugely impactful. Where again, you're not doing the work in start to finish yourself, and neither are they. And I think finding where you can be kind of mutually beneficial, and oh by the way, working with the existing kind of incumbents in the ecosystem, in the system, and proving that you don't have to reinvent it, bodes well for all of those, not only existing patients but like what the partnerships look like, I'm sure, in your pipeline, really, if you think about it that way, and what that can do. There's kind of like the obvious question of talking about the basically taking like the kind of clinic, the GI clinic and the treatment, and putting it online or digitally and doing it through this kind of platform and ecosystem and leveraging, everybody wants to talk about we're leveraging AI, we're leveraging machine learning. I mean, really, when it comes right down to it, it's just like taking that spreadsheet that you have and making it a lot better and intuitive and faster and like in a way that is useful really for like the average person to remove that cognitive load. But then there's like, what can you do with it? What can you do with the data sets? What can you do with the recommendations? What can you do with personalization? Kind of again, and selfishly wanting to chat with you today, like, what does that actually mean in a way that goes beyond like this buzzword and this baseline of like, cool, yeah, everybody can kind of somewhat do that, but here's how maybe you're doing it differently or even think about the potential differently.
Yeah, so we use AI and machine learning. So think of us as almost like a data science company with a pooping problem, like by structure. So, a lot of what we do, so we use those tools in two places. So one is to solve the where do I start problem, right? Both on the nutrition side and on the behavioral health side, it is sometimes challenging to know kind of like what foods you're trying out first that are higher likelihood than others to be causing symptoms so that you don't have to spend 5 years doing it. And on the behavioral health side, it's like what are the tools and techniques and skills that if I build them will help for me and given my whole context and culture and all of that kind of stuff. So we solve that problem with the machine learning and AI and some of the predictive stuff. And then the other place that we implemented is dynamic as you go through the programs. So if it's not working, why continue to do it? There are other paths, right? And so we use that throughout the programs, right? And I think that's really important. I think the future that these tools have in terms of like improving the way that care is delivered, I think is truly transformational. And for us, we utilize all the data in an anonymized and aggregated HIPAA compliant way to learn from every patient that comes onto the platform so that the next person gets a faster, more effective program, of course. I fundamentally don't believe, and I think this is the perspective of a patient, that just an AI tool is enough. There's two things. One is it's going to be wrong a lot of the time, at least in the early stages. And so we always think about AI and like predictive, like recommendations and best next action as an open loop. So everything that we've built has a human, the patient or the coach. In our platforms, you have a coach. It is a shared decision that happens. It is a shared path that you co create with the tools to share the right information so you can make that educated decision for yourself. And then I think the other piece is like the coach and the human that you're building a relationship with is the most important piece. For me, like the vibe that we're trying to get is here's a warm hug. I get it. I understand. I hear you as a patient. From a patient to another patient, it sucks. And we know how to fix it. Let's walk through a plan. And so that's if I don't think AI by itself or technology by itself can get both of those elements. And so that's why having a human as part of it's really important.
How common do you think that perspective is when it comes to, I don't want to put you on the spot relative to like, oh, let's say competitors in the space, but just in general, I think there's the misconception. We kind of come at it and hear about it a lot of different ways with companies entering the broader health, fitness, wellness space, nutrition, that they have this AI that can do this thing that eliminates Dr. X or trainer Y or coach or nutritionist. And you're just like, I don't think people actually want that. Like, I don't think that's what they want at the end of the day. Sure that they want this kind of personalization aspect and they want a kind of a quicker path to this, whatever their remedy, solution, treatment is, but they do want that warm hug that does come with that human in the loop aspect. Is that common, not common? How do you see that kind of fitting into this evolution where people kind of get AI on the brain and it's like, oh, we're here. It's like it's sentient. We figured it out. But it's certainly not there to your point.
Yeah, I mean, like I think my caveat is we know our community better than any other community, right? So like our opinion on the space, first of all, is always evolving, but where we have like landed today is a reflection of the gastroenterology, the digestive health population. That's, they want a warm hug. I don't know if someone who's trying to lose weight needs a warm hug and they want to interact in a similar way. I'm not sure. I think what we will see, and what is typically the same thing in all the hype cycles, is that there is, if there are a few people that really go to the edges, and then we see a retraction to the mean. And I think and I'm not an expert on this, like I'm always looking to educate myself. And some of the articles that I've read from some really great folks, I would predict that we're probably going to land where AI and those technology tools, together with a human, are better than just the technology tool itself. Either, you listed some of those things, both on a productivity standpoint, or on a accuracy standpoint, or on a outcome standpoint, the combination of those two, or even on a business model perspective, right? Like better margins. I think the combination is probably where we're going to land if I were to look in my crystal ball. And in certain instances, the human aspect is really important to meet a person as a person. So a bit of a wishy-washy answer, but I think it's really exciting though, right? That's the other thing, is like the possibilities of what you could do today relative to what you could do, a little while ago, I think is very different. And so it's really exciting to be in the spot.
Yeah, it's we shall see. One way or the other, like it'll definitely play out. But I tend to agree with you, and uh, having that like measured kind of optimism around like, okay, great, but specifically as it relates to the work that you're doing and healthcare in general, like we can't have this move fast and break things approach. That's non-negotiable. So we do have to be in this place where we're ensuring that the outcomes and the safety and the efficacy, like all those things, line up as we figure out what the edge cases are and potentially push closer to them over time. Yeah, maybe as we get towards the end of the conversation, again, having you on and some of the things that I'm kind of thinking about and curious about, the removing the barriers between different aspects of kind of holistic health and wellness. Obviously, you've already kind of taken that when you're talking about the gut brain axis and the mental health aspect of this, which leads me to this question, which is like, how far does that go within the platform, right? Like, what other aspects of health? How does this relate to GI? Does it expand beyond GI? How do you think about that roadmap and opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, one can dream, right? There's a lot that can be applied. So, our look, the GI space is so big. I think I just want to like start there. From a prevalence standpoint, GI conditions are twice as prevalent as diabetes. And how many diabetes companies exist out there? How much more of a problem is it, or still a problem is it today as it was 10, 15 years ago? Even with Livongo and Omada and Verta and all of these companies out there, it's still a real challenge. So, I think there is a clear need for more companies, more work, more emphasis on the GI space. And I think as a prize alone, huge, right? And from a potential impact, huge. Down the road, and like I think one of the things that's really exciting about how we've designed it is that the infrastructure around how we do nutrition, the infrastructure around how we do psych, the infrastructure around all of that could be applied to other things. So there's some really interesting budding research around sleep and physical activity in GI, like how those things are connected. And then, of course, there's the applicability of these kinds of tools, right, to other conditions. And we've started to explore a lot of those. And so, whether that is us or through partners, TBD. But I think there's a lot of need as you're describing, and so we're excited to share our science with people, across different spectrums.
Yeah, even as you're listing off some of those things, it's like, yep, checks the box, like sleep, physical activity, like all those things. It makes a ton of sense. It'll be interesting to kind of see how that rolls out, and making sure that, again, it's a balance between all of the things that you've set in motion stay in motion and continue to deliver at the kind of quality that you've come to expect and demand, and then introducing these new things as you go. Thinking about kind of maybe looking ahead a little further, or even you kind of mentioned the Mayo Clinic partnership, the mind aspect. Anything else that you're particularly excited about or in the works that maybe we should look out for, or just kind of keep in mind?
Yeah, I mean, we've been working on these on this kind of ecosystem kind of approach for a little while. We We work with a lot of primary care groups. We look at partnering with other folks. For example, on our nutrition side, we noticed that one of the things that was really exciting is, okay, great, like I know that these foods are things that I can't really tolerate that well. And then how do you buy them? We've got this great database of grocery products across the country that you can filter. But what about stuff that I want at home? And so we announced this partnership with Daily Harvest. And so now you can we have a curated set of Daily Harvest products that you can, get sent to you. And, I think the main thing that we're really focused on for next year is launching with health plans and employers. And, we should be available to millions and millions of patients next year and the years after that, all in the goal of really addressing GI from the population perspective rather than kind of individual by individual. So we're really excited about that. And if folks are interested for their organization or for their plans, please get in touch, and we'd love to chat. And I'm always here to preach the GI gospel. So just to learn more about GI and gut health, like I'm more than happy to do that.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell them whether it's website, social, however you would want people to learn more, follow along. What's the best place?
Yeah, I mean, best place would be on our LinkedIn, Ayble Health, or on our website, just ablehealth.com, AYBLE health.com. And there are a few places to get in touch with us. And we'd love to have people try the product as well. Dive in and use it for yourself. Let us know how you like it.
Yeah, perfect. I encourage people to get in touch. We'll have the links in the show notes here. And Sam, it was an awesome conversation. Thanks for making some time today.
Thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
One more thing before you head out. Help us spread the word. Take a minute to rate and review the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, or share this episode with a friend. And if you like conversations like this, you'll love the Fit Insider newsletter. We send it every Tuesday. The link is in the description. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you back here next week.